Believe it or not, it's been about a year since I started uploading on this channel again. At the time, I wasn't really sure what I wanted this channel to be about, and to be honest, I still haven't really cleared that up, but I knew that I wanted to talk about things I liked. And so I chose to start with Dwarf Fortress just a few short weeks before the beta was scheduled to launch for Adventure Mode. I figured that the incoming update would provide a good opportunity for a follow-up video. A year later, this is that video. Not because I forgot to make it, but because Adventure Mode only just left beta a few weeks ago. A wait of this length would have probably fractured many other communities, but Dwarf Fortress players have taken it in stride, a testament to the faith and trust Tarn and Zach Adams have built up with Dwarf Fortress players, who at this point know that no matter how long the next update takes, it will arrive bigger and better than advertised. So it's no surprise that Adventure Mode is huge. Not only have Tarn and Zach managed to include all the features from the classic version, but in typical Bay 12 fashion, they've also snuck a lot of entirely new content into the game, some of which looks to lay the groundwork for the upcoming Magic update that I can only imagine is so massive, it'll come out very shortly before I die of old age. The bulk of this new content is tied up in the all-new Chosen mode, in which you become the chosen representative of one of your world's gods, but for me, all of this content is equally fresh. As one of the many players incapable of fully wrapping their head around Dwarf Fortress Classic's hieroglyphics, this recent Steam update has been my first opportunity to experience the full gameplay loop that Adventure Mode and Fortress Mode combined to create. And much like diving into Fortress Mode for the first time, Adventure Mode has been a significantly more complex experience than I realized I was signing up for. Unlike Fortress Mode, much of this difficulty is not optional. One of the things I mentioned appreciating the most about Fortress Mode when I first talked about it a year ago was how naturally the game's difficulty scaled to the player's ambition. A player who digs too greedily and too deep in search of treasure will become intimately acquainted with the phrase "losing is fun" as they burrow into more and more fun that they're not entirely prepared for. But a player overwhelmed by the complexity of Dwarf Fortress, who just needs a little time to get familiar with the basics, could quite easily live just beneath the surface for years of in-game time in complete safety, only seeking out danger once they truly felt ready. Adventure Mode does not afford new players this luxury. The combat system is the crown jewel of an adventure, and combat represents a large portion of the content available to the player at any given time. This combat system is masterfully made, unlike any other that I've ever seen, but it is as complex as it is unforgiving. Just like in Fortress Mode, creatures don't have traditional health bars, and instead have their health tracked through a complex injury system, which makes combat significantly more volatile, unpredictable, and realistic. A fully healthy dwarf still has to approach combat with caution, since they're only ever one stray hit away from death at all times. A well-armored player character can easily block, dodge, or just tank 20 hits in a row, or, with just a little bad luck, could just as easily have a limb or even their head removed on the very first turn of combat. Especially early in a save file, recklessly approaching a fight will leave your character looking like the Black Knight faster than you can blink. But the game does not take any great care in making sure you're not thrown into the fire immediately. This feels appropriate for a game with the reputation of Dwarf Fortress, but I was surprised at the difficulty of Chosen Mode's introductory fights, considering the mode's advertisement as a more railroaded foundation for new players who didn't want to jump into the deep end too quickly. If anything, I've had an easier time getting runs off the ground when I'm not playing Chosen Mode, and I'm given more free rein to engage with the game's other systems. and many of these systems are quite interesting. Crafting is quite basic, and survival mechanics like the need for food, water, and sleep are rudimentary, but other systems like the procedurally generated conversations are quite impressive. The complexity of Dwarf Fortress's world generation means that each NPC across the generated world has a unique knowledge base to draw on, based on who they know, where they've spent the majority of their life, and what's been going on locally. This allows you to have conversations that, despite their repetitive, procedurally generated phrasing, are functionally quite complex, allowing you to make a wide variety of demands, requests for information, offers of help, and even do things like encourage citizens into an insurrection. Of course, the most demanding of these options will be rebuffed if you're just an everyday dwarf starting their adventure, but the other interesting system Adventure Mode has to offer is the ability to build renown. Did you do something cool? Sing about it in the taverns, tell people you talk to about it, spread the word whenever and however you can, and eventually tales of your exploits will give you additional influence over the local populace, opening up new options to you. But again, we come back to combat as the main source of renown, as well as the main thing benefited from gaining renown. You win fights so that you can brag about it, and your bragging gives you allies that will mostly just help you win more fights. It's fighting all the way down, and as good as the combat system is, this can result in a bit of a murder hobo playstyle, indicative of a mode that just isn't finished, especially once your skills start hitting legendary and the game starts to break a little bit. Adventure mode is at its best when you can influence a world that you're already invested in through Fortress mode. Starting an adventure to vanquish a foe that's gotten the better of a recent fort, or recovering an artifact that's been stolen, or invading a nearby site can have immediate and noticeable impacts on the world around you in your Fortress mode runs. But the biggest strike against Adventure mode is the fact that you have to retire your fort in order to play an adventure. Not being able to take part in these adventures with a fortress active is surely the result of some understandable technological limitations, but that doesn't make it any less disappointing, since without a fortress you're truly invested in being influenced by your adventures, many of your conquests can ring a little hollow. Of course, adventure mode has already made huge strides just in the process of being ported to the Steam version, and the future inclusion of things like site building will certainly add a vital extra dimension to the mode, but the bare bones functionality of many of the game systems not relating to combat tell me that there's still a long way to go. When Tarn and Zach say there's 25 more years of work to do on Dwarf Fortress, I look at Fortress mode and I ask myself, how on earth are you going to add more? But when I look at adventure mode, I don't ask that question. I see the room for improvement, but that's exciting. Dwarf Fortress development might be a slow and painstaking process, but the game hasn't let anyone down before, and I don't think it's going to start now. I look forward to playing the completed game in the nursing home, but even half-baked, I can't quite bring myself to put this new addition to the gameplay loop down.